system, which is also called SUR, enables a wide range of different patient care activities that are all centered around caring for our patients who have surgical procedures. So I'm going to describe what we're using the SUR module for by following what is a typical patient journey. So firstly, in the SUR module, we have functionality for booking our patients' surgical cases. Secondly, it's used for the booking of pre-op clinic appointments and all of the care activities associated with those pre-op clinic appointments. Thirdly, the SUR module is used for the care of the patient throughout their immediate perioperative care on the day of surgery. And finally, the module is used for a unified discharge process and other activities that are even performed after the patient leaves our hospital care. So what exactly does booking of the surgical case involve? Firstly, it involves some surgeons, offices in Expanse will be submitting now electronic booking requests into the SUR module as opposed to the current way of sending paper. It is also in this phase that we activate our wait times reporting interface. Our OR booking clerks at each of our 4 sites will be turning the electronic booking requests into an actual booked case on the surgical grid. Also, at this point in the process, we receive electronic requests for special equipment that we do need to have on hand for the day of surgery. Both surgeons and anesthesiologists can place electronic orders for our patients at any point along the process, but sometimes it will happen early in the process to enable us to prepare for the patient's arrival at the pre-op clinic or day of surgery. And we can also perform some reminder phone calls to remind our patients of when to arrive and other instructions by using the SUR module. When a patient comes to the pre-op clinic, we do a number of activities in the SUR module. First, their appointment needs to be booked. Then, when the patient arrives, the nurse will be doing nursing documentation in SUR by using a standard of care that's being developed. And if there are any orders to be enacted, nurses will do that. And typical orders would include lab tests or ECGs. Then we come to the next stage of our patient's journey, which is the day of surgery. This involves quite a lot of activity. Firstly, there's 5 phases of care in the perioperative process: preoperative, holding, intraoperative, PACU recovery, and phase 2 recovery. And each of those phases is housed within the SUR module. At each point along the 5 phases of care, there's a specifically designed nursing documentation for nurses to complete and standards of care to facilitate their documentation. Once again, orders can be activated at this point, and nurses will be using an EMAR BMV, which stands for Electronic Medication Administration Record and Bedside Medication Verification. This was demoed yesterday. And nurses will be using the transfusion administration record, which is also called TAR. And that is being demoed right after this session. Another thing to talk about here is preference cards. Preference cards are being built for all of our procedures. And for those of you that don't know what preference cards are, they're basically like a recipe card which explain what you need to gather up or the ingredients that you need for your surgery, how to prepare the operating room for the surgery, how to set it up for the patient's surgical case, all based on the surgeon's preferences for that particular procedure. And we also have SET-P reporting in particular for our endo cases. In the discharge component of the SUR module, there's an opportunity to do follow-up calls, nursing documentation, and post-op surgical site infection and other quality measures can be analyzed after the patient has been discharged based on data elements that are all captured during the patient's journey. There are several reports available both within the SUR module and also custom reports that our report writing team is developing. So SUR is an integrated module, and the image you see here represents what I showed you on the prior slide, but I've shrunk it down just so I can point out some of the key points of integration with the module. During the booking phase of the surgical process, the SUR module integrates with the Meditech registration application. As I mentioned earlier, the wait times interface integrates with SUR. There's an integration point with procurement or MDRD when we're requesting our special equipment. Order management is integrated with a surgical services module. And SUR is integrated so that when our patients arrive at the emergency department requiring urgent or emergency surgery, we're able to quickly add those patients to our SUR OR tracker and begin immediately preparing for their case and for their care. And all of the information is available for the nurses to see that was gathered during the emergency visit. Inpatient nursing integrates with the SUR module. So when an inpatient goes for surgery, all of this information flows to support safe and efficient transfers of care. We are building specific workflows and functionality to support mental health and ECT procedures that are done at RVH. And we have a link with the obstetrical program and support the performing of C-sections at all 4 sites. The SUR module also supports the surgical processes that are associated with tissue and organ retrieval by incorporating the Trillium Gift of Life workflows into our module. We can promote quick and efficient care for these patients. Throughout the patient's journey in the SUR module, the system integrates with both pharmacy and the ADUs. And likewise, the lab and blood bank integrates with the SUR module so that all information lives within a unified medical record. Collingwood, GBGH, and Headwaters have a direct integration with the Meditech Materials Management module. And this integration facilitates the building of those preference cards that I mentioned earlier and the documentation of items and implants that are used during surgical cases. And we can even do subsequently case costing for our surgical cases. RVH, while not using Meditech Materials Management, uses a system called Plexus, and this integration has been developed by our interface team to bring in all the surgical items that RVH needs from the Plexus database. This will facilitate RVH and their build of preference cards, documentation of items, and case costing as well. And finally, all of our documentation, we're able to perform surveillance on post-op surgical site infections and other quality measures. Data is available in a data repository to facilitate this, in addition to some terrific standard reports that exist in the Meditech SUR module. So as you can see, the SUR module is big and touches a lot of different areas and workflows in the hospital. We do not have time to show you everything that SUR can do. So for today's presentation, we're going to be focusing on this area that I've highlighted of the surgical process, which is the day of surgery. And further, we're going to be focusing on a part of that day by focusing on the day surgery and intraoperative phases of care and nursing documentation. So you may be curious to know what you can expect for today. For Collingwood, GBGH, and Headwaters, this is going to look different from ORM, but some of it will feel reminiscent of what you're currently using. RVH, this is going to look very different from PISIS, but I think you'll see it supports much, if not all, of the same functionality. Above all, I just want to remind you that you will have lots of training to cover all of the information that we cover here to do your jobs. So we thank you for your curiosity to learn more and hope you can just sit back and enjoy and try to relax and enjoy the remainder of our presentation. As Caitlin mentioned, if you can hold your questions until the end of the demo, that's great. If you do have a question and type it in chat, we will try to answer simple questions in the chat window to make sure that we can satisfy any questions that way. So with that, I will stop talking and turn the presentation over to Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. That was an excellent introduction to our module. I'm just going to turn my camera off because I do live in the country and my internet is not the speediest, so I do need all the power that I can get to give you this presentation. So. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so for today's presentation, we will be showing you an elective surgery patient journey through the booking process to PACU. The site selected for this test patient's experience is going to be an RVH patient. For the sake of time, some of the documentation has been pre-completed on the patient and will be summarized using the expand screens to explain the booking process and the screening process because if we were to go through the entire experience, we would probably need about a half a day. So we will try and get through everything up to the point of the pre-op admission quickly so that you can see what happens to get the patient to the point of being admitted to the hospital. So when you first log into the module, you have surgical services, and then you have a variety of different desktops. So you have the scheduler desktop, the pre-admission testing desktop, the biller desktop, and the SUR tracker. Today, throughout the presentation, we are going to be talking about those 4 desktops in particular. The desktop that I'm going to start off talking about is the scheduler desktop. So this is the RVH scheduler desktop. We have a patient here that we have already put into the system. So to kick off the process, a pending appointment is entered by the surgeon's office. This puts the patient onto a surgeon-specific waitlist and opens an account with the Ontario Health for wait time data collection and communicates information to the OR booking clerk, such as preferred date and time of surgery, if a pre-op or anesthetic appointment is required, if an ICU bed or surgical step-down bed is needed post-op, if the patient has any special considerations, or if procurement needs to be notified to order any special equipment for the case. The pending appointment is created by the office admin staff. When the pending appointment is created, an account number is initiated at that time, and the office can create new medical record numbers if the patient has never been to any of our partner hospitals before. So because the pending process happens prior to the booking, I can't show you exactly what has happened during the pending process, but we can go in and look at this booking and see what would be entered at the time of that pending appointment. Allison, are you in my patient?
Yes, I will cut out.
Just working as designed.
Yeah. And you will get a pop-up if someone else is accessing your patient. So only one person can be in the patient at one time. So that was a
I apologize.
teaching.
I'm out now.
um, so we're just going to just go in and have a look as to what has been entered for this particular patient. So this is what the pending/booking screen would look like. So keeping in mind at the pending, the office is not assigning a particular date and time to the surgery. So this box here would be not available at the time of creating the pending appointment. But just to orientate you, facility, surgeon, procedure, primary, secondary surgery, an assisting surgeon if required, laterality, timing of the case, setup, cleanup time, case type, if the patient is an AM admit, anesthesiologist and anesthetic type, and the OR that the patient is going to have their surgery in. If we dig down further, we have the demographics tab. So we have registration information. So this is where all of your patient demographic information gets pulled in from. And then we have this SUR scheduling screen that we have created. So this is a communication screen that the office is able to communicate that information as to preferred date and time, if the patient requires admission before surgery, if an anesthetist is required, an assist is required, any type of pre-op appointments are required for the patient, and then any special equipment requirements that may be needing to be ordered are all communicated through this screen. And then we also have our special indicators, which I'm sure has been touched upon on earlier presentations. And moving along, we have our wait times tab. So this is the piece that kicks off the patient's electronic communication to Ontario Health that opens their wait time account. So we have referral type, referral date, source, depending on the path that's chosen, of course. And then we have all of that information that files in. And then once the pending appointment is filed, electronic messages will send to Ontario Health opening the wait time account. When the case is booked, additional information is sent giving Ontario Health the date and time of surgery. If any edits are made to that booking, additional messages are sent to Ontario Health. And then when the case is closed, a closure electronic message is sent to Ontario Health notifying them that the case has been completed and that wait time account can be closed. So that is one of the really nice features of this integration piece in Expanse. So this is the booking screen and the pending screen essentially. So bookings would take the pending, assign the date and time to the case, and then we would have the case booked. At RVH, we have screeners that would then screen the patient for determining if they need an anesthetic consult or a pre-op appointment, and we have that built in to the pre-admission testing desktop. So I'll just show you what that would look like. So I have this other test patient here, and we have it built. So they would go to their work list, add defaults, and then we have these two screening tools that are used to evaluate the patient by the screening clerk. And then they would continue to complete the screening tool to determine the need for those appointments. This particular screening tool will score, and then further direction, depending on the score, will tell the clerk the path that is required for that particular patient. And then once the call is completed, they're able to complete this patient from their list and move forward. So our patient today has had her screening done, and it was determined that no pre-op appointments were required or anesthetic appointments. She's young, healthy, and was cleared for surgery. So that is the booking pending process that is in place. And so we will then move on to the surgical trackers. So in SUR, we have a multitude of trackers. So we have private trackers, we have public trackers, that have been built. So public trackers are those that are visible in wait rooms or in the MDRD department. They work the same way as an arrival departure tracker does at an airport and do not have patient identifiers. The private trackers are on desktop computers or tablets and have patient information. They will today we will use the RV All Patient tracker for our demo. And from here, you can see we have many different patient information pieces displaying on this tracker. We do have a lab here that has been resulted on our patient. We have the open chart feature. We would have surveillance information containing COVID information if this patient had been COVID swabbed. We have our start times that are pulling in from our booking. We have a registration status. Some of our statuses do update with registration statuses, and we do have some manual updating statuses as well, where the nurse can bump the patient along in their patient journey. We have all of our patient information pulling over from our booking. So we see surgeon, procedure, and laterality. We have anesthesiologist, anesthesia, and surgical assist, if there was one pulling onto our tracker. We have some orders that need to be acknowledged, and we have some lab results to view and special indicators. So we see here that our patient is hearing and vision assist. And if transport order exists,
Mute.
we can see here that there was a beta ordered on this patient, and the result is 0. And if we click on the acknowledge, that was the order for the beta. Select acknowledge and save. Our acknowledge indicator will disappear off of our tracker. So that is the main tracker that is going to be used in SUR. So that has brought us up to the pre-op patient arrival. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Joy to pick up the pre-op.
Thanks, Karen. Just a quick shout out to all my RVH OR peeps that are in the house. I'm going to turn my camera off now because same reason, I don't want any interference with my presentation. So I'm going to jump into the tracker. This is going to be like a running list of all the patients that are booked for the day of surgery. So when we're actually viewing this in after go live, you'll see that this list is quite long with patients. So I would just need to find my patient on the list of the trackers, and then I'm going to open their chart. So I can do that in 2 ways. I can either toggle over here to the open chart routine on the right-hand side, or I can just click right into this little box here next to the patient's name that it looks like a little open chart icon. And this is going to launch me right into the patient's chart in SUR, onto the view cases routine. So what's on the display is the current chart, or the current case, I should say. As you can see down here with the footer buttons, you can toggle over to the lifetime and it will show you how many surgeries the patient's had before. But for today's purposes, we're going to be with the current procedure. Above the view cases routine, you'll see all of the EMR part of the patient chart. That's where we can review all the patient information, including vital signs, lab results, and the patient summary screen, all of which will be reviewed later today in depth with another demo session. I am going to click into the summary screen because I just want to show you quickly that I can review and edit all of the special indicators, the patient history, allergies, which this patient has a few of. I can review all the home medications and edit them as well. And also there's the implantable devices. So this patient, it's showing that this patient has a Mirena IUD in place. So below the view cases routine is all the perioperative care phases. So you've got all your pre-op, holding, intra-op, phase 1, phase 2. And this is part of the patient chart where the clinical person can actually document. So since I'm portraying the surgical daycare nurse today, getting the patient ready for surgery, I'm going to access the preoperative routine. So now this launches me right into a screen that is the one-time record. And this assists with communication and documentation of a patient's movements throughout their surgical phases of care. I'm going to select the area and station where I brought my patient to as the surgical pre-op surgical nurse getting the patient prepped for surgery. So surgical admissions at RVH, I'm just going to select an interview room. I'm going to select the time that they were into pre-op. I'm going to pop myself in here, but I'm going to pick my friend Krista because this has been separated by people who actually work in the preoperative area so that when they're looking for themselves in the list, it'll automatically find their name there. I do need to document my date and time that I've spent with the patient. And click OK. So I want to do a quick save here. So you can see there's a few options. There's a save and there's a quick save. If I clicked save right now, that would pop me right out of this whole preoperative care phase of charting. I don't want to do that because I want to access some tabs up top. So if I do a little quick save, it's going to save my work, and then that information will flow over to the tracker. So if I toggle up to the care plan button at the top, this is where I need to add in the appropriate standards of care that I'll use to document on any assessments. So this one already has the day surgery adults loaded in, which is perfect, exactly what I need. So then I'll pop over to the work list, and this is where I actually document on these interventions. So I'll select the ones that I wish to document on. And it's also got the frequency of when these should be documented on. The status due, I mean, this is from 19 hours ago, so we obviously loaded this up a while ago. But if I was loading this on the day of surgery, it wouldn't be 19 hours overdue. So I'm going to keep it brief for the purpose of time preservation and only select a few interventions. I'm going to select vital signs, pre-op checklist, and the IV assessment. So I'm clicking in the Now, Document Now field, and then I'm going to toggle down to the Document button at the footer button. And what that does is it launches me right into those assessments that I've selected. And you can see that it's got the list of the assessments here that I've selected. So this is where I'm going to start doing my documentation. So I am saying that I have started an IV, and it's going to be, I'm going to say it's a peripheral saline lock. I get to pick the gauge of it. How many attempts? Well, one, because I'm a super nurse. Let's see here. I am going to flush it with 3 mils of saline. What did I use to secure it? Some adhesive strips and some film dressing. So that's it for that part of that assessment. Now I'm moving on to my pre-op checklist, and this is where it's very similar to a lot of facilities have in place. You just check off everything that you find with your patient, and it's just all about getting that patient prepped for surgery. I will try to keep it brief. And it said a questionnaire. I've got some consent. I've got my surgical consult, previous chart. Lab values, as Karen showed you, that there was a beta HCG on that patient. Patient prep checklist. What did I do to get this patient ready for surgery? Didn't do any meds. What items did the patient bring to the OR with them? Cell phone, underwear seem to be common ones. So they were ambulatory. When did they last eat solids? So I can do an N-1 and that'll backdate it. Oh, it's not working for me. That's okay. Let's say they ate at 8:30 last night. And fluids at 5. Not on any isolation status. Orientated ×3, able to follow directions. Did I do any of these further preps of bowel prep, hair removal, pre-op scrub? Not with this particular patient. Yes, they voided. No, they're not pregnant. And then completed by. So since I'm pretending I'm Krista. And then now I'm going to pop down to my vital signs. Left digit. Okay. That was an electronic. And I'm going to add in a blood pressure. It will calculate the mean for you, and it lets you know that that's on the low side by flashing up that yellow highlight. Great. So I've done everything on my assessment there. So I'm going to save and exit so that I can pop back out to that work list, and then you'll see that it's shown that it's done. So now that I've completed everything I need to do to prep my patient and completed all my documentation, I'm actually now ready to send the patient over to the OR holding waiting area. I'm going to go back into that pre-op one-time record, complete the times out. And choose a destination. I'm going to choose holding. How did they get there? I haven't given a report to anybody. This is going to pop in me because I'm logged in as me. And you have to complete the chart. So every time we have a one-time record, you have to complete it. And now I am actually going to save because I'm done with that phase of care. So if I go back to the tracker, just to show you guys, it had shown that they, I will refresh it actually. Now it's showing the progress that they're out of pre-op. The status and the station haven't really been updated yet because that's going to get updated by the person who does the next phase care. I could say patient ready for OR as a communication piece while we're waiting so that people can see that as a pre-op nurse. People can look at the tracker and go, oh, the patient's ready for the OR. That's great. But now I'm going to open the chart as the OR nurse in the holding phase. So the holding phase, some CARE4 sites will be using this care phase and others won't. It depends on current workflows and how best to achieve them. I am going to demonstrate this and how it could be used by the operating room nursing staff in order to check in their patients at that last stop before moving on to the operating room. So what you see is it's launched me right into that holding room one-time record. And it's very similar to that pre-op one-time record. It's that brief document of times, area, and station that the patient was seen in and by which staff. Into holding, it launched to me automatically. And now I'm going to do a quick save again because I do need to document my pre-op checklist. So I'm going to just toggle right over to the work list because this was already done by the first nurse, the surgical daycare nurse. So now as the OR nurse, I'm going to now document to that. So I'll select it. select document. And I want to actually see where the pre-op nurse has done her documentation, his or her documentation. So it will help guide me with my documentation. So I can change the mode here. And now you can see the left-hand column is showing me the chart, the documentation of the pre-op checklist by the pre-op nurse. So I can use both of these as a guide with my patient and the patient's chart and complete my findings. It is going to look a little different than that other mode that we were looking at. But it's just you can use this as a confirmation. And I'll work my way through chatting with the patient and being able to complete this as I discover my findings. And static questionnaire. I've got my consent, got the previous chart, I've got a surgical consult. We saw that the beta HCG test had been resulted. Patient has been changed. What do they have with them? They have their cell phone and their underwear. If I discovered something else, I could hit other and make a comment. There is a comment field here. If the patient came without underwear and they say that they sent them with underwear, then I could verify that and type it in here and say the patient gave their underwear to their spouse. Almost there. To look up. And now I'll sign it off as verified in the OR by. And save and exit. And it shows that that's completed. So now I have got my patient ready to transfer to the operating room. So I'm going to go back to that one-time record and say that I'm leaving the holding area, finish off my times, select the destination, operating room, transfer method, completed by, completed date and time, and save. So that's it for the checking in of the patient. So I'm going to now hand it over back to Allison, who's going to kick off the intraoperative phase of care.
Thank you, Joy.
My pleasure.
Just give me a moment to get my screen sharing going. All right, please let me know if you cannot see my screen. So as you can see, the tracker's updated. It says they're out of holding now because Joy did that documentation. And I'm going to go into the intraoperative record. The intraoperative record is very similar to the screens that Joy has been showing you before, and some of the fields work exactly the same way. The operation date and time field automatically pull in from the booking, as does the operating room. If the room changes, the nurse can simply delete this out and replace it with the correct room that the procedure is taking place in. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I will demonstrate how these fields work. We can say they're into the room now, so they're in at 9:43. And similarly, when anesthesia starts, when the briefing happens, when anesthesia is ready, when there's the surgical pause or timeout, when the procedure starts, when the debrief timeout happens, when the procedure ends, and out of room time can all be documented in this way. If you want to use this now button and you need to change the time, you can always backspace it and change the time to make putting in the date and time fully accurate. But I'll just leave that there. Oh, sorry. If there is a delay in any of these processes, you can look up the reason and say why the delay happened. Let's see, maybe equipment was not working and we had a delay of 10 minutes while we had to fix that. And similarly, we can do that in all of these other fields. I'm not going to fill out all of those fields just in the interest of time. We here can also document our ASA classification. Our patient is an ASA 1, a normal healthy patient, and their anesthesia type, which will be a general today. We also have a query for the case type. This pulls in automatically from the booking. So they're a planned and elective case, and we're tracking our returns to OR within 24 hours. I will say no, this patient is not coming back to the OR after or within a 24-hour period. There is a section here to document the actual procedure that was performed. So if the procedures performed differ from what the procedure was booked as, the nurse can go in here and document that. And once the surgery is over, the outcome of the surgery is documented as well. So most of the time it will be completed, but if other things happen and it has to be canceled for different reasons, we can document that as well. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Joy, who will go through the staff and the staff position and skin prep sections of this record.
Thanks, Allison. So you can see we've got a nice long list of staff that we can document to by designation. For instance, anesthesiologist, circulator, scrub, radiologist, radiology technologist. And if we have someone present for the surgery that doesn't fit in these categories, then we can use that other field. We love the other field. So we would need to, and most of these designated areas look to a staff dictionary, or it can be free text if needed. And we also do need to document their times as well in the time date field to the right of their name, where their name would go. For instance, if Allison, you were able to just pop in Dr. Lamb under anesthesiologist, we could just give them a quick demo of what that looks like. And then the date time is very similar to the date time field that I was using to document myself into the holding and surgical daycare record. So that's your times in and times out. We would do them, go back in and finish the times out after. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the staff. Then position, this is where we can get very descriptive in the position of the patient for the surgical procedure. And if the nurse documenting doesn't see a relevant entry, they can select the other and add a comment. We can also add comments on any of those selections that are listed. So for instance, for this procedure, we would select lithotomy down in the, yep. And then I was thinking maybe arm extended right, arm extended left. And you can see that there is that little comment box there that's just to the right of each of those selections. If we were to add in a comment that, I mean, I don't really have too much to comment about their arm being out, but we could add extra padding, but we have the opportunity to add that after too. devices that are used for positioning. So we will use bilateral arm boards, bilateral wrist safety straps, and then a safety strap as well. So that's the one below that one that you're on there. Yeah. So that's where I would be very descriptive as to where is that safety strap. Is it across their thighs? Is it, across their abdomen? So we can add that in the comment field. And then positioning, padding, support. This is where you would add in all that, all the protection items that we use for positioning. For instance, a foam headrest square. That's what we would use most of the time. Then there's another whole section for stirrups below because we have so many stirrup types. So we're going to select yellowfin stirrups for this patient. And then the additional positioning devices is just kind of a mishmash of a bunch of other stuff, a lot of orthopedic stuff in there. But yeah, it'll just be getting used to where to find your things. But if nothing there suits what you want to chart, you can always click that other button. We love it. And then you can make a comment. So then the skin prep section. We have the opportunity to add up to 3 separate skin prep sites, which is great. And if we were to pick site 1, it just opens up to the condition of the skin before prep. Was there a hair clip done? If you didn't do a hair clip, just leave it blank. Charting by exception here. You can select who actually did the skin prep, who did the hair clip, what the surgical prep site was from a lookup, or you can do free text in there too. You can choose the appropriate prep solution that you used, and if you don't like any of those, you've got the other option to pop something else in there. The prepped by, it all looks to a staff dictionary. And it might be under Caldwell. That's probably what
Sorry.
it's. That's okay. And then the 3-minute dry time observed, yes or no. And that's for our allowing our prep solutions to dry. And then we can do that up to 2 more times with this record. Invasive procedures, we're still in the creation mode with this entry, so we're not going to be demonstrating this today, but this could be where the nurse demonstrates or documents any lines, drains, or catheters that are inserted during the procedure. Let's move on to equipment. So this is where the intraoperative nurse can pull in all of the specific equipment used during the procedure and then document any of the settings and parameters that were needed to be charted on that specific piece of equipment. So it can look to a lookup, as Allison's doing here. If you want to type in cautery, or you can pick that cautery ConMed #1 down there. I'm thinking I'm going to use a Megadyne. Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm going to use a Megadyne because we do tend to use the Megadynes a lot at RVH, and we can just select the appropriate one. As you can see, the serial numbers have been built into the name of each item, each piece of equipment, and maybe a smoke evac as well. And it's just like a Google search almost. And then once you've finished selecting your equipment, you can click OK. So now I'm just going to show you guys, you can see there's a tiny little dog-eared piece of paper looking icon beside the cautery. So this is where the nurse would be able to document all of the pertinent information about that particular piece of equipment. Not all of our equipment has one of these little screens to document on, just the ones that require settings, volumes, temperatures, etc. So it's launched us into the documentation screen. I mean, if we weren't using a grounding pad, we wouldn't need to fill in any of the ground pad information, but we are going to use the Megadyne. So I'm just going to indicate, yes, we used a Megadyne. You can choose your coagulation type, standard spray, pinpoint, put in your settings of 40, your blend, if you used a blend option on the settings, and then your cut settings, we'll do 40 again. That seems to be a common combo. Smoke evacuator, yes. Bipolar, no. And then ligashire, no. And then that's done. We're finished. So we've charted everything we need to do for cautery. So when you go back to the screen, you can see that that little icon turned yellow, and that's just going to indicate that there is actual information documented into that little screen. Items, we are also still in creation mode with this entry, but this could be where the nurse documents certain items that were used during the procedure to assist in inventory control and case costing. Implants, we won't be showing that either because we're still in creation mode with that one, but that's where all of the implants that were used on the patient during the surgery would be documented. Explants, we are going to document in there today because we're taking out an IUD on this patient. So if we click on that and we go down to implant history footer button at the bottom, this is going to look to the implants that we saw on that summary screen when we first looked at our patient. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to hit OK. And then it's going to pull up all the information about that implant. And it says how many you removed. So if we were taking screws and plates out of a patient, we could say we removed 6 screws on 2 plates or whatever. You could do an explant reason why you're taking it out. Patient request. Patient wants to get pregnant. And then you can click OK. And then it shows that there is information entered there. Now, irrigations, we can choose up to different 2 different irrigation solutions to document interoperatively. The documentation of which will flow to the patient's intake and output record in the EMR. So we've built out the common irrigation solutions used interoperatively, but we do still love that other button. So you could use that if you like. So we would select the type of irrigation that we wanted to use for this solution A, and then we would put the volume into the irrigation amount. And then if you had another solution, you could add it as well. Medication additives. Now, this is not where the nurse would document any medications administered by the surgeon or the nurse during surgery. That would be done on the MAR tab at the top of the page, and I believe that we've already had a presentation about that. So what this medication additives screen is used for is where the nurse would document when a medication is used to prepare an implant or flush a device, such as heparinized saline flush of a vascular graft to prep it for implantation. So
oh, right. Yes. Pharmacy has to mix it. Right.
Just gonna mute that person.
Yeah, I did it. Joy,
Oh, yeah.
just a time check. We've only got a few minutes left.
Okay, I'm almost done.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Output is where we would track our estimated blood loss as advised by the anesthesiologist, measured blood loss as indicated in our suction canister, or another output amount, for instance, from the irrigation solution. And this also flows to the patient's intake and output record in the EMR. So I'm done now. I'll hand it back over to Karen.
All right, thank you. I will talk fast to finish off this OR record. So moving into the pathology and cytology sections. So these have been built with what is known as query links. So when you answer yes to specimens collected, it will link us to the lab module when we file the OR record. So documenting clinical history, surgeon, radiologist, etc., is important for the pathologist, of course, to give history on the specimen. So down to specimen A, if we indicate the type of specimen that was collected during this surgery, which could be an endocervical polyp, we would then document date and time the specimen was removed from the body and date and time the specimen was placed in the fixative, which would then calculate the cold ischemic time for pathology. We have the ability to document up to 26 specimens. So specimens A to Z have been developed into the OR record. This is typically a collapsed portion of the OR record because it is a lot to scroll through. So if there are no specimens, it is buried in the OR record, so you do not need to scroll through it. Cytology is built out the same way with specimens A to F and only requiring the time the specimen went into the fixative. Or sorry, time collected. Down to our order management section. So because we don't have a nice button that launches us directly into order management for the OR record, we have built out our own little section of order management. So we have included some of the important features of order management, blood banks, chemistry, coag, hematology, microbiology, and pathology. So we can easily enter those orders straight from the OR record. Down to our accounts section, so we have a query link that's built here as well. So if there was a miscount and an x-ray was required and we said yes to that, that will link automatically to x-ray, notifying them that we do require an x-ray when the OR record is filed. Scrolling down to our dressing section, so collaboratively, we came up with this collective list of dressing supplies that have been used throughout all 4 of our ORs. Again, we have another section for our dressings. We have our transfer methods to PACU or to an inpatient unit. We have all of our destinations. So typically, using the 80-20 rule, our patient would go to the PACU for post-op care. And then we have our completed by and our date and time section. Again, we have that nice little end button, which would pull in for real time completion of date and time. And then the only other piece that we would need to do would be to go up and finalize the actual procedure and then confirm that we completed the case near the top of the OR record. So if we didn't veer from what had been originally booked, we can hit the N, which would then open up another section confirming our wound classification. So we could say clean contaminated for this case. And then if we had a secondary procedure being performed or a secondary surgeon, we could note that and start and end times for those secondary procedures in this section.